we are going to discuss the inguinal canal. The learning competencies for this topic include that one should be able to describe and demonstrate the extent, boundaries, and contents of the inguinal canal, including the Hasselbalch's triangle. One should be able to explain the anatomical basis of inguinal hernia. Also, one should be able to differentiate between the two types of inguinal hernia, direct and indirect inguinal hernia. One should be able to enumerate the coverings of the direct and indirect inguinal hernia. Before I begin today's lecture, I would like to quickly revise some of the important relevant points from our lecture on the anterior abdominal wall. We know that the aponeurosis of external oblique, as it goes down, its lower border turns backwards to form this inguinal ligament. The upper surface of this inguinal ligament is grooved, and this inguinal ligament extends from anterior superior iliac spine laterally to the pubic tubercle medially. We also know that at the medial end of this inguinal ligament, some of the fibers do not attach to the pubic tubercle. Some fibers are modified to form a lacunar ligament, which is triangular. Some fibers go upwards and medially as the reflected part of inguinal ligament. We also know that in the lower part of external oblique aponeurosis, there is this triangular deficiency. This is called the superficial inguinal ring, and this superficial inguinal ring rests upon the pubic crest. Also, we know that the internal oblique muscle and the transversus abdominis muscle, the inguinal fibers of these muscles, they arch upwards and then turn downwards and medially and form a conjoint tendon. Also, behind these muscles is the fascia transversalis, and there is an opening in the fascia transversalis which is called the deep inguinal ring. We also know now that the fascia transversalis has a tubular evagination along the margins of the deep inguinal ring. This evagination is the internal spermatic fascia, and along the margins of the superficial inguinal ring, the external oblique aponeurosis gives a tubular evagination called the external spermatic fascia. Also, the internal oblique muscle has a modification which is called the cremaster muscle. This muscle, along with the external and internal spermatic fascia, extend down as the coverings of the spermatic cord and also as the coverings of the scrotum. The inguinal canal is an oblique tunnel in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall. This tunnel is approximately 4 centimeters long. This is an oblique tunnel, so it is directed downwards, forwards, and medially. However, in the children, the inguinal canal is directed straight forwards. This canal is better developed in the males. It is much narrower in case of females. The extent of the inguinal canal is from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring. Since the inguinal canal is obliquely placed, the superficial and deep inguinal rings, they do not overlap each other. So, this is a schematic representation of the inguinal canal. The inguinal canal is beginning from the deep inguinal ring and ending at the superficial inguinal ring, and this canal has an anterior wall, a posterior wall, a roof, and a floor. What are the contents of inguinal canal? It contains the spermatic cord in males and round ligament of uterus in females. Also, the ilioinguinal nerve is a partial content of the inguinal canal. That means it does not pass throughout the length of the inguinal canal. This nerve, it enters the canal by piercing the internal oblique muscle. Then it traverses through the inguinal canal and it lies superficial to the spermatic cord. It exits the canal through the superficial inguinal ring. Let's now discuss about the spermatic cord. What are its coverings and contents? The spermatic cord is covered from outside to inside by an external spermatic fascia, which is derived from external oblique, the cremaster muscle derived from internal oblique, and the internal spermatic fascia. The spermatic cord contains the vas deferens, this structure. Then there are the testicular arteries that you see here, the testicular arteries, the artery to the vas deferens, this one, the cremastric vessels, the pampiniform plexus of veins, the lymphatics from the testes. There are some nerves also present in the spermatic cord. The ilioinguinal nerve and the genital branch of genitofemoral nerve. Also, the sympathetic plexus, which is present around the arteries. Spermatic cord also contains remnants of processus vaginalis. Coming to the boundaries of inguinal canal, this canal, in its anterior wall lie the skin, superficial fascia, aponeurosis of external oblique muscle, and in the lateral 1/3 of the anterior wall, the internal oblique muscle is also present. Coming to the posterior wall of inguinal canal, from behind forwards, this wall comprises of the parietal peritoneum, extraperitoneal connective tissue, and the fascia transversalis. Also, we know that the inguinal fibers of transversus abdominis and internal oblique form a conjoint tendon. This conjoint tendon comes to lie in relation to the medial half of the posterior wall of inguinal canal. The reflected part of inguinal ligament comes in relation to the medial 1/4 of the posterior wall. Coming to the roof of inguinal canal contains the arched fibers of the internal oblique and transversus abdominis muscle. These arched fibers are the ones that originate from the inguinal ligament. The floor of the inguinal canal is formed by the grooved upper surface of inguinal ligament. Also, in the medial part, the lacunar ligament, which is a modification of inguinal ligament, this ligament also comes to lie in the floor. So now we know that the internal oblique muscle comes in the anterior wall, roof, and also in the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. Function of inguinal canal. It allows passage of structures of the spermatic cord to and from the testes to the abdomen in males. In females, it permits the passage of the round ligament of uterus from the uterus to the labium majus. It is very important to understand the mechanics of the inguinal canal. The inguinal canal is a site of potential weakness and therefore is a site of hernias. However, the human body has several compensating factors. Let's discuss these compensating factors that protect the inguinal canal. First, obliquity of the inguinal canal. We know that the canal is oblique in adults and is directed downwards, forwards, and medially. So, the two openings of the canal, the deep inguinal ring and superficial inguinal ring, they do not overlap each other. However, we know also that this is not in the case. This is not the case in newborns where the canal is straight forwards. So this mechanism is not functional in the newborns. Second, we also know that the anterior wall, which is formed by the aponeurosis of external oblique, this anterior wall has a deficiency which is called the superficial inguinal ring. This superficial inguinal ring is guarded by the posterior wall. How? Let's see that. So this is the superficial inguinal ring, which is a deficiency in external oblique aponeurosis. And you can see that posterior to this ring, the conjoint tendon is located. So this strong tendon guards the deficiency in anterior wall of the inguinal canal. Now, we know that there is a defect in the fascia transversalis in the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. This defect is guarded from the anterior aspect by the fleshy fibers of internal oblique and transversus abdominis muscle. Another protecting mechanism of the inguinal canal is the shutter mechanism of internal oblique and transversus abdominis muscle. We know that the internal oblique muscle, it comes in the anterior wall, roof, and the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. So, when this muscle contracts, the roof will become closer to the floor and it will close the canal from top downwards like a shutter. And this is the shutter mechanism. The arched fibers of transversus abdominis also take part in this shutter mechanism. Next is the ball valve mechanism. Basically, the cremaster muscle, when it contracts, it will pull up the spermatic cord and this will plug the superficial inguinal ring. So this is the ball valve mechanism. Next is the slit valve mechanism of the external oblique muscle. The superficial inguinal ring has two crura, a medial crus and a lateral crus, which are united at the apex. So, when external oblique muscle contracts, the two crura approximate, or you can say they come closer to each other, thereby guarding the integrity of the superficial inguinal ring. So this is another protecting mechanism. Lastly, the hormones may play a role in maintaining the tone of the muscles of the inguinal region. So all these mechanisms clubbed together help to protect the inguinal canal, and whenever there is increased intra-abdominal pressure, such as during coughing, sneezing or weightlifting, all these mechanisms, they come into play and obliterate the inguinal canal so that the openings are closed, and this prevents any hernia. Let us now discuss about how this inguinal canal develops. The inguinal canal basically develops during the descent of testes. What is the descent of testes? Basically, in fetal life, the testes develops in the extraperitoneal connective tissue in the upper lumbar part of the posterior abdominal wall. Gradually, in the fetal life, it descends downwards, passes through the inguinal canal, and before birth reaches into the scrotum. So, this is a section through the developing inguinal canal. You can see that this is the testes. Now, as the testes develops and descends down, it is guided to descend down by this fibrous structure, which is called gubernaculum, that you can see here in blue color. This gubernaculum extends from the lower pole of the testes down up till the anterolateral part of the anterior abdominal wall. As the testes begins to descend, a peritoneal evagination also precedes it. This is called the processus vaginalis. Now, the testes has started to descend down, and all the nerves, vessels, and also the vas deferens that you see here in green color, all these structures also relocate down along with the testes into the scrotum. How does that happen? By the 4th month, the testes reaches the deep inguinal ring. It rests here up till the 6th month. It travels through this developing inguinal canal in the 7th month, and it reaches the superficial inguinal ring in the 8th month. In the 9th month, the testes descends down into the scrotum. As the testes is descending down, it acquires musculofacial coverings from the muscles and fascia in the inguinal region. Finally, the stalk that was the gubernaculum disappears by the 6th month. This processus vaginalis also should disappear. As you can see in this diagram, after the testes has descended, the processus vaginalis disappears and only a part of it remains as a partial covering around the testes. This covering is called tunica vaginalis. So the inguinal canal develops as the testes descends down into the scrotum. Now, let us talk about abdominal hernia. Hernia is a protrusion of a part of the abdominal contents beyond the normal confines. Hernia can be internal and external. Today I'll be talking about external hernia. Internal hernia I'll talk about when I discuss the peritoneum. So this is a hernia. What are the parts of a hernia? There are the coverings of the hernia. Then there is this hernial sac that you see in black color. This hernial sac has a constricted neck, and this is the body of the hernial sac, and these are the contents of the hernia. The contents could be any of the abdominal viscera, the most common being loops of the small intestine because they are most mobile. There are various types of abdominal hernia. As you can see in this picture, the most common ones are the inguinal hernias. I will discuss these hernias in more detail later on. The femoral hernia you have already done with the lower limb. There are umbilical hernias that occur through the umbilicus. These can be congenital or acquired. You will understand them better when you study the development of midgut. Then incisional hernia, as the name indicates, a person had a surgery, and after the surgery, due to damage to the nerves in that region and the improper healing through the incision, the abdominal viscera can herniate out through that incisional region. Epigastric hernias, they occur in the upper part of the linea alba. There can also be divarication of recti that occur through the rectus abdominis muscle. These are usually more common in the females. There can also be lumbar hernias which are seen in the lumbar region, and the Spigelian hernia. The Spigelian hernia is a hernia through the Spigelian fascia, or the layer of tissue that separates two groups of abdominal muscles. Basically, between the rectus muscle and the oblique muscles. This type of hernia is also called the lateral ventral hernias. So, when the hernia of the abdominal contents occurs through the inguinal canal, it is called inguinal hernia. Inguinal hernias are of two types, the indirect hernia and direct hernia. Let us discuss these two types in detail. The indirect inguinal hernia. This is the most common type of hernia. It is more commonly seen in males and is usually unilateral. It is also more common on the right side and is more common in children. Let us discuss why this hernia occurs, and then you will understand why it is more common in males. Basically, this hernia occurs because of inability of the processus vaginalis to disappear after the descent of testes. I have told you that this processus vaginalis should have disappeared. If it does not, and then it provides a path for the hernia to occur through the inguinal canal. Now, since the inguinal canal is wider in case of males, that is why this hernia is also more common in males. And since the processus vaginalis is persistent at birth, so the hernia usually develops at birth only. So that is why it is a congenital variety. What is the usual content of this hernia? The loops of small intestine. They enter through the deep inguinal ring. They pass through the inguinal canal. They may reach up till the superficial inguinal ring. If the processus vaginalis is persistent right up till the scrotum, then the herniated contents may descend down into the scrotum as well. Please notice one thing. This is the inferior epigastric artery that I had discussed in the anterior abdominal wall. The neck of the hernia lies lateral to the inferior epigastric artery because the deep inguinal ring lies lateral to the inferior epigastric artery, as I had mentioned in my lecture on the anterior abdominal wall. So the neck is lateral to the artery, the body is in the inguinal canal and sometimes maybe also in the scrotum in case of males, or in the labium majus in the females. Also, you can see that since the superficial inguinal ring is medial to the pubic tubercle, so the body of the inguinal hernia of the indirect variety, it is medial to the pubic tubercle. Let us now try to decipher the coverings that should surround this indirect inguinal hernia. In this diagram, first of all, this is the skin, and you remember that deep to it is the superficial fascia, followed by the external oblique muscle, and the aponeurosis of it continues down as the external spermatic fascia, and this is the internal oblique muscle that continues down in the scrotum as cremaster muscle and its fascia, and this is the fascia transversalis in yellow color that descends down beyond the deep inguinal ring. It descends down as the internal spermatic fascia. So the coverings of the indirect inguinal hernia are, of course, the skin, the superficial fascia, then the external spermatic fascia, the cremaster muscle and its fascia, and the internal spermatic fascia, followed by the parietal peritoneum, that is the lining of the sac. Before I begin the direct inguinal hernia, I want to quickly revise what we had learned in the anterior abdominal wall. In this diagram, you remember this is the posterior view of the anterior abdominal wall. So you are now inside the abdominal cavity and viewing the anterior abdominal wall from behind. And this is the urinary bladder, from the apex of which a median umbilical ligament is going up. Lateral to it are the obliterated umbilical arteries, and on either side of them are the inferior epigastric arteries. When these structures are covered by the peritoneum will also form a fold, and this is the median umbilical fold, followed by the medial umbilical fold on either side, and the lateralmost fold would be the lateral umbilical fold, and this lateral umbilical fold is above the inferior epigastric vessels. So a word about the Hasselbalch's triangle. This Hasselbalch's triangle, this is the right inguinal region, and you can see here the boundaries of this triangle. It is bounded medially by the lateral border of rectus abdominis muscle. Laterally, it is bounded by this inferior epigastric artery, and inferiorly, it is bounded by the inguinal ligament. Now, this is the left side inguinal region, and so this is the Hasselbalch's triangle of the left side. You can see that this triangle is divided into two parts by the obliterated umbilical artery. So the direct inguinal hernia occurs through this Hasselbalch's triangle. Let us discuss in detail. Direct inguinal hernia comprises of 15% of all inguinal hernias. That means it is less common than the indirect inguinal hernia. It is more commonly seen in the elderly males and is mostly bilateral. Why is it seen in old age? Because in old age, due to hormonal changes, there is weakness of the abdominal musculature, so they cannot support the inguinal canal, thereby leading to this hernia. The sac of the direct inguinal hernia, it bulges anteriorly through the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. What is the usual content? The loops of small intestine. This hernia occurs through the Hasselbalch's triangle, and I have told you that Hasselbalch's triangle lies medial to the inferior epigastric artery. So the neck of direct inguinal hernia lies medial to this artery, and an important point is that the neck of this hernia is wider compared to the indirect inguinal hernia. The body of the direct inguinal hernia lies in the inguinal canal and can extend into the scrotum, and the body lies medial to the pubic tubercle, just like the indirect inguinal hernia. So this is another picture to give you a comparison of the direct and indirect hernias. This is a normal person, and here you can see that the indirect inguinal hernia has entered into the inguinal canal through the deep inguinal ring lateral to the inferior epigastric vessels, whereas in direct hernia, the entry is medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. So, what are the coverings of direct inguinal hernia? Before that, the direct inguinal hernia is also of two types. The one that occurs through the medial part of Hasselbalch's triangle is called medial direct inguinal hernia, and the one that occurs through the lateral part of the Hasselbalch's triangle is called the lateral direct inguinal hernia. I am discussing the coverings of the medial direct inguinal hernia. See, it is covered by the skin and the superficial fascia. After that, the external oblique muscles modification, that is the external spermatic fascia, will cover this hernia, and there will be the conjoint tendon followed by fascia transversalis and extraperitoneal connective tissue. This is the peritoneal sac containing the hernia. So we see here that instead of the internal spermatic fascia, which is a modification of fascia transversalis beyond the deep inguinal ring, this hernia is covered by fascia transversalis because it is not passing through the deep inguinal ring. So this portion will be covered by fascia transversalis. Also, instead of the cremasteric muscle and its fascia, which cover the indirect inguinal hernia. The conjoint tendon is coming because the internal oblique muscle will form the conjoint tendon in the medial part, and the direct inguinal hernia is occurring through more medial aspect of the anterior abdominal wall. Let us now discuss about complications of inguinal hernia. First is irreducibility. Basically, in the initial stages of hernia, it is possible to manually reduce the contents back through the superficial inguinal ring into the inguinal canal and backwards. However, when the neck becomes narrow, or if the hernia is very large, it may be impossible to reduce it back, and this is irreducibility. Obstructed hernia. This is another complication. It occurs when the neck of the hernial sac becomes narrow, as you see here. So, whatever is present in the lumen of the small intestine will not be able to go further ahead, leading to obstruction. So, obstructed hernia. This complication is more commonly seen in indirect inguinal hernia, of course, because the neck of that hernia is much narrower than direct inguinal hernia. Another complication is strangulation. When, due to compression or tightening of the neck, the blood supply to the herniated viscera is compromised, the viscera undergoes ischemic changes, and this is called a strangulated hernia. This is a surgical emergency. At the end of this lecture, you should be thorough with the anatomy of the inguinal canal, along with all the structures that lie in the various walls of the canal. You should know about the contents of the spermatic cord. You should also be able to distinguish between indirect and direct inguinal hernia under the following headings. The incidence. Indirect hernia, you know, is more common. Etiology. You know that indirect hernia is more commonly seen in young age because of persistent processus vaginalis, and direct hernia is seen in old age because of weakness of abdominal musculature. Entry into the inguinal canal for the indirect hernia is through the deep inguinal ring, and for the direct hernia, it is not through the deep inguinal ring. The neck lies medial to the inferior epigastric artery for the direct hernia and lateral to the artery in indirect inguinal hernia. The usual direction, coverings. Obstruction is more common in indirect hernia because of narrow neck. Also, the internal ring occlusion test. What is this test? Basically, you reduce the hernia manually through the superficial inguinal ring and through the inguinal canal. Then you apply pressure on the deep inguinal ring and ask the patient to stand up and cough. When the patient will cough, if it is an indirect inguinal hernia, the swelling of the hernia will not reappear because you are applying pressure on the deep inguinal ring. However, if it is a direct hernia, on coughing, the swelling can be seen. So, these are the differences, and you should write down these differences in your notebook because this is a very important question. Also, please draw these important diagrams in your notebook. First of all, the various planes that help to divide the abdomen into various quadrants and the names of all those quadrants. Draw a diagram to show the formation of rectus sheath at different levels. Also, coverings and contents of the spermatic cord. Practice the diagrams for inguinal canal, the various walls, the structures in the roof and floor. Also, draw the diagram for indirect and direct inguinal hernia along with their coverings. Thank you.